So first of all, I'd love to hear from members of this group who have the opportunity to give my assignment a try um, and hear what you came up with. Sorry. So what? So what's the point? So okay, what's the point of the assignment? The assignment is that, and the assignment is actually came to me thinking about Sandy's thoughts that she expressed during the seminar last time about the extent to which what we're doing is we're basically looking, or we're studying words, studying language. And that is certainly one of the most important things that we do in philosophy generally. But when we study language, we can look at it as an internal system of its own rules, and then we might call that syntax. But we also might look at the ways in which it refers and the kinds of things that it can refer to. And we might call that the semantic dimension. So the semantic dimension is, so to speak, transcends language as a system of rules and a system of morphemes and phonemes and all the rest of it that can be looked at as an abstract object, independent of whether it refers to anything at all. And Aristotle mentioned several times he's looking at it as in terms of its semeion, its referencing. So we are looking at language, yes, indeed, and we are studying language indeed, but we are looking at the way it refers, if it refers. And the first thing we discover in this is that there is no reference if we're using homonyms, right? Or the reference is, to use a Quinean term, inscrutable, right? There is no determinate reference if our words, we use identical words, but with differing accounts. So the point of the exercise that I assigned was for you to begin looking at this in terms of how language refers and what kind of things it refers to, and more generally, if there is a general description of anything that language could refer to. Right. So the assignment was, what does anything have to be in order to be something? Or you can say something or other. And this gets us to this opens up the ontological, what I would like to call the ontological dimension of the categories. And yeah, well, I'd like to talk about that, but that was the purpose of the exercise. And I'm going to ask anybody who's ready to volunteer, who gave it a try. I asked you to do it in about one paragraph, so we want to keep it fairly short. And just, what are your thoughts as to what anything would have to be? Counterfactual. What would it have to be?
And by the way,
if it were something.
If any of you have written down a paragraph, you can share it to the group if you'd like to. Everyone can share in the group right now.
Oh, great. Thanks, Bo. So see, raise your hand so you can get into a queue, and then if it ends up being a lot of hands, then we'll be a little bit briefer in dealing with it. But I certainly encourage anybody who did the work to share it.
Tim's hands up. Go ahead, Tim.
All right, Tim. See what you got.
Very brief work. I spent maybe 5 minutes on it, but anyway, this is what I came up with. One short paragraph.
Hello.
To be something,
Hello.
anything must be said of nothing and said to be in nothing.
That's right.
That is, it must be a primary substance, viz., a particular substance that is not a universal substance that can be said of something else, and a substance as such, not an accident that is incidental to its being.
Okay, well, you definitely you took to heart using Aristotelian terms.
that was it.
I love it. Okay, Tim, now if you're going to veer ever so slightly from the strict and beautiful Aristotelianism that you just evinced, how would you rephrase that? I mean, I don't mean to put you on the spot, and if you don't have a way of rephrasing it right away, that's totally cool. I come back to you when you got an answer or whatever. But I'm just going to ask.
Well, I mean, it must be a primary substance, meaning that it is not a universal or an accident or incidental to the substance of the being,
Okay.
of this anything. I mean, that's just using somewhat the same terminology. I really don't have other terminology to use to talk about it. So I don't know how to phrase it.
Right. No, that's perfect. No, this is good. Okay, so what you're saying is for anything to be something, it has to be primary substance.
Correct.
Okay, and so what I'm going to do, what I'm hoping is we'll widen the scope here a little bit, because we do notice that in order for there to be substances, there needs to be universals that qualify them, and there needs to be accidents. So whatever something is going to be going to need to be more than just primary substance. So I'm curious if other people got to that or not, or how much agreement there is as to your thesis. So let's go to Mike and then Greg.
Oh, just to follow up on that, that was my question. When you are referring to something, is that synonymous with substance? Or
well, that was what I wanted you to figure out. I use very innocuous general terms, and now you're starting to recognize it's very hard to find language that to get at the kinds of things that Aristotle is talking about. So I hope everybody feels that it's quite a difficult enterprise he's undertaken, and that might account for some of the well, not only the abstraction, but the, how do you say that? I don't want to say, well, the rough-hewn nature, the non-terminological nature of how he's speaking here. He's trying to be precise, but he's not. He doesn't want to rely on how the tradition is spoken, because he's precisely criticizing that tradition. Anyway, we got two more hands. Hey, Mike. I don't know if I even answered your question, or do you want to follow up with a comment before I move on?
yeah, no, just when I first saw that, and I've been thinking of it over the past week, but I mentioned I didn't have time to write the actual paragraph, but that was my first question. What do you mean by something?
Well, what does anybody mean by something, huh? So some being, perhaps. All right, sorry. Let me see. I got Greg, and then I got Charlie, and then I got Tristan. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. So there was Garth. Do you remember when you got in line?
I got in line after these guys, so just
Okay.
It was
Gotcha.
Greg, Charles, me, Tristan. I think I'm not sure.
Okay, Tristan, if you're cool with that, that's the order we'll go in. All right, thanks. All right, Greg, let's hear.
Well, if I had stuck to one paragraph, I would have had something like what Tim had, and I couldn't bear to leave the terms undefined or described. So it goes on for a few paragraphs. And I'm not sure if I got to your point about it requiring universals and accidents. I only did so by accident, not consciously. I snuck some of it in, but I didn't know that was an insight I was supposed to have.
All right. No.
A couple short
observations.
in the categories, beings are described in terms of two relations, whether they can or cannot be present in something else, and whether they can or cannot be said of, and parenthetically, used to give an account of anything else. And my answer ended up being a primary substance as well. A primary substance, what we would think of as an individual thing or being, cannot be present in something else and cannot be said of anything else. And I couldn't stop there. That would have been the one paragraph version. In the sentence, in quotes, Judy is a punk. Punk can be present in other things such as Sheena or a song. This means punk is not a primary substance. And I don't know if anyone of my age is in the 70s song references. Punk can be said of Judy, used in an account of Judy, in that it gives us useful information about Judy, such as what kind of music she likes. This excludes punk from being a primary substance. If, in quotes, Judy could be present in other things, we would be saying that there is some divisible or shareable property Judiness that could be present in other people or things. Other people, Sheena and other things, a song can be punk, but Judy is not present in these other things.
Right.
And so she, sort of halfway there. If it's an individual substance, and if it has to not be able to be present in something, Judy, the individual, is looking like that. So can Judy be said of another? Can it be used in an account of something else? To say of something that it is Judy does not yet tell us anything about it. Judy could be my pet turtle. So the Judy of the sentence, Judy is a punk, cannot be said of something else. The appearance that Judy is being said of two things, a punk and a turtle, is the result of using Judy homonymously. The combination of these two negative conclusions, that Judy cannot be present and cannot be said of anything else, indicates that Judy is a primary substance or an individual thing. So that's the long version, but the short thing is what Tim said, an individual substance, and I didn't quite get to consciously make the connection that those universals and accidents are also required for something to be unique or individual.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for putting all that work in. I love it. That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Let me see. I'm going to hear from some other people, and then I'd like to have a little discussion about this before we move on. Let me see. So the next one's Charlie. You're up next.
Okay. I didn't write anything down because that would have required effort, and I'm averse to that. My substance,
You're taking.
I own actually a substance, and I own a horse.
Mm.
And the horse that I own doesn't belong to any neighbor or doesn't belong to anything else. It is really its own individual thing. It's there by virtue of the universal of animal and by the universal of what does it mean to be a horse.
Mm-hmm.
What are those things that constitutes horseness?
Ooh.
And the horseness is exhibited beautifully in my horse. It's a fine example. It's not referenced to anything else. There are no other horses that are referenced to it. The other horses don't depend on it. And it has quantity. It's about 14 hands high, whatever that means. It's average length. It weighs about 1,000 pounds or 1,200 pounds, however much well-muscled and good, well-trained horses weigh. It has qualities, lots of qualities. One of its main qualities is its color. It is a roan and a beautiful sleek coat. And another of its qualities is its quickness. It's a really fast horse, and it really learns fast, but it's because it's in the category of horseness and it participates in the universal of horse. it doesn't learn grammar, and it doesn't make syllogisms, and it doesn't reason, and it doesn't do things like that. That pertains to another category of primary substances of rational animals.
Hey, Charlie, can I add, so you're giving us a very Aristotelian description, a categorical description of a specific object. But what I was hoping you do is think about, of these categories. What do they tell us about anything at all? Whether it's a horse, whether it's a number, whether it's a thought, whether it's a god. Right. And so everything you're saying about the horse wouldn't hold about for a number, and it wouldn't hold for a god. And so we need to bump up the generality here to the highest level in order to think about the ontology that's being implied as necessary here. That's kind of part of what I want to get to. So Charlie, I'm going to give it back to you to see do you want to encapsulate your thought about what something is for Aristotle? As kind of a summary statement.
Yeah, I think maybe the idea that what makes something to be what it is its, of course, individuality, and we haven't had the word yet, and we haven't talked about it yet, but its essence, its essential participation in the universal, in the secondary substance.
Right.
And it is a particular of that individual substance, and therefore it is a primary substance that has not reference to anything else. It is in and of itself, and it can receive and accept. I don't need to, but I was just going to go through all the 9 accidents, the one substance in the 9 accidents.
Right. No, yeah. I saw that coming.
Yeah. But I mean, you get the idea that.
Oh, absolutely.
What it is. So that was just my little contribution. It's
no, I appreciate that. That shows. What an Aristotelian breakdown of the description of a specific kind of being would look like. It was precisely, you took the substance as the individual, and then you got the universals that relate to it, to its essence, and then to its accidents.
Yeah, and it is an example of what you mean by the particular.
Exactly right. All right, thanks, Charlie. We're going to move on and get some more voices. We're going to go Garth, Tristan, hey, Peter, what happened to you?
There's a weird technical feature that if I'm a co-host, it's impossible for me to raise my hand on the current version of Zoom. We were just playing around, but if you get a chance at some point, you can after other people.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Let's go to Garth and then Tristan.
Okay. I think maybe there's an issue with the way you phrased the question. Because you said, what must anything be in order to be something? Yeah. And I think if we really strictly interpret that, then the short answer is we don't know for that question. And then regardless of what is a thing is more specifically, what must we be able to say about it before knowing any of its particular features? Yeah. The answer to that, I think, is nothing.
Well, okay, that's one way to look at it. Garth, if you can, I would appreciate it if you briefly justified your answers.
By the way, Michael, this is Garth's document on screen sharing where he outlines his reasoning.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think Aristotle's not clear about what the metaphysical implications or ontological implications of saying of or calling are, basically. So you could read what he's writing as just a argument about the proper and improper use of language. And I'm sort of biased toward that reading because I've read other Aristotle, and you know, his treatment of logic and his treatment of like interpretation and stuff, very often he's trying to deal with sophistical arguments and things like that. So that's sort of my feeling on it. You know, basically you can establish, yeah, okay, if you're gonna say of something or call something, it has to be a something, and then it is a subject if you're giving it a name or an account, and it's a primary substance if you're giving it predication according to a secondary substance. But that doesn't mean that something has to be that. It could be a something independently of us. And so that's what I see as why I have to answer that way.
Okay. Hey, maybe in the after hours beer session, after we've gone through today, I'm curious how much of that thesis you'd still want to maintain. But yeah, anyway, maybe I should have been much more detailed in my question, but I just wanted to keep this. I wanted to keep this simple. I wanted you to think, and you thought, and I totally appreciate it. And you're making some good points. Although I think we can get more out of this text than you're giving it credit for. And I'm just going to be a jerk, and not against you, Garth, but just because I'm a jerk, and say maybe it's because you're using external authority, you're using external sources to frame this for you. And really, I just really wanted you to just focus on what have I read and understood, and what does this tell me about being, right? I know that there's debates out there that this isn't a metaphysical text, and I certainly agree with that, but I think it's also not just a logical text. And by virtue of the fact that we can pose this question and answer it more or less coherently, that's already, for me, evidence that there's more going on here than logic. But Garth, I love your work, and I don't want to knock you down, but I want you to just grapple with the text. Tristan, go ahead.
So I just have a real quick contribution to this, and I just this just echoes what we've talked about here, and yeah, I just think that in order to have something and to talk about something, there has to be, you know, as we've said, these universals, this essence, this kind of general breeding ground for instances to come out of. And I know I'm straying off of Aristotelian things with that. It's just me getting flavorful, but yeah, like yeah, I just think the way I see it is keeping it pretty simple, is just focusing on the generality of it.
Cool. No, I agree, and I think that's how you have to do it, and was the point of asking such a general question. Generally, yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks. So does Aristotle use a talk in terms of like thatness and whatness? I guess in his own Greek way he does.
Yeah.
Was that translated at all in this? I forgot. Whatness?
No. I mean, that is a translation. When he talks about the this, it's often translated as the what.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, we can kind of get into that. What again? I'm trying to just not import like external perspectives here. Let me say, especially in Garth's defense, Aristotle is impossible without the commentary tradition, because it's just so incomplete, these texts. And so, yes, we must go to the commentary tradition in order to find those little pieces of reasoning that fill the gaps. And to Garth's defense, yes, he did exactly what we need to do to really grapple with this and really understand it. We need to go to these secondary sources. Now, I'm not a big fan of any and all secondary sources. I really do think that we should stick to the ancient commentators who had access to many more writings than we do, and their commentaries on Aristotle's lectures, which include the metaphysics, are based on much broader textual knowledge about the totality of his writings than we have. And in 19th, 20th, 20th century commentary has a lot of axes to grind. And so the more recent commentaries are going to try to stick a certain favored method, the analytic method or the historical method or the continental method, and they're going to try to shoehorn Aristotle into that. So I think that we get very partial views of Aristotle by relying on these more recent commentators. So that's kind of like, look at Alexander of Aphrodisias, look at Thomas Aquinas. These are magnificent, rich commentaries, and they're Porphyries on the categories, great stuff. If you want a list, I'm happy to post it somewhere. But if you want to use commentaries, check these guys out. These are amazingly cultured individuals who knew a lot more about the whole philosophical world from which Aristotle emerged and that he influenced than we do. Anyway, so sorry, end of digression. I got Mike, then Tyler.
Okay, so assuming then in your question, what must anything be in order to be something, that you're referring to a substance, then I would also say that I think, maybe I missed it, but I think we're forgetting about secondary substances. So like the species and genus. And if we include that, then if we stick with Aristotle's language, then what anything must be in order to be something is that it can't be in anything else as an accident.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Yeah, that's
okay. So yeah, okay, great. No, that's getting close to how I think about this. So it's nice to hear some commonality here.
so I say that speaking in Aristotle speak, but on a deeper level, like getting it, like what that really means, I have to say I don't get it. For the most, well, yeah, I don't get it fully. I have to mull it over and digest it and let it marinate in my brain. But I guess I'm just repeating what I read in Aristotle.
Okay, well, that's often also a very good thing to do, right? It focuses you on the salient details, right? We have to separate wheat from chaff, and every text is going to have chaff depending on what your intention is when you read it. And right now, just trying to get the basic thoughts. We want to get the scurrilously difficult stuff. We want to bracket that and put it to the side and just try to stick to the fundamentals. All right, cool. Thanks, Mike. Tyler, you're up.
So to address the first question, I may be going slightly outside of Aristotle, but my first response would be it must be some one thing. However, Aristotle is going to say that primary substances are what are numerically one. Most specifically, they are individual. And so he seems to break this up as beings, ways of being, and then the relations between beings, or what can be in them or about them, but which does not stand on its own. And what does not stand on its own requires the primary substances. And so we can say of the primary substances that there are different kinds of them. And so animals and subcategories of animals and then plants and so forth are kinds, but then there are things that are not related to kinds of them, and those would be relational and accidental. So color, I believe he mentions quantity. And so in order to say anything about anything, we have to address in what kind of priority it has, right? So if it requires something else, then we know that we can't account for it as independent of what it requires. And so there is a hierarchy between these, and the hierarchy goes, primary substances are required for the different kinds of beings. And then and then from those, there are what is in those. And primary substances can also, he mentions, admit of contraries. So they're the only things that can have at one time in one way be one thing and then be the opposite at another time.
Exactly.
I think that's all I have so far.
Cool. Thank you. Let me see, I'm going to get Peter in there and then Tim.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add was that, primary substance, when you think about it, you can't say anything at all about it without the universals or a mix-in or something like that. And so in some sense, I was thinking of like Hegel's sense certainty, in the sense that you think the reality is that stuff out there that you can touch, but you find out you can't say anything about it. You're just left inarticulate. So I think that you have a primary substance on its own is as if it was nothing in a way, because there's no determinacy to it. Therefore, there's no being to it.
Awesome. Tyler, you want to follow up on that, and then Tim?
Yeah, I do. I do want to say that there are some things you can say about primary substance, though, that makes it a bit different, which is their admission of contraries, right? So it's not a completely neat parallel.
Yeah, and I think that the question is not how do we define this something? Is it what must it be to be something? And as Tyler, I'm on Tyler's side on this one. A secondary substance requires a primary substance, and so a primary substance doesn't need a secondary substance other than for its description, but it doesn't need a secondary substance for its being. Whereas a secondary substance requires a primary substance for its being.
Right.
So that's why I'm sticking with primary substance. It must be, for anything to be something, it must be a primary substance. I might be able to be convinced otherwise, but right now that seems right to me.
Okay, just a sec. All right. So there's obviously a lot of overlap, which is good in the things that you've said. And just before we move on, I want to see if anybody wants to. Oh, so, yeah. I'm going to hit Charlie here, but I also want to hear anybody who read or contributed to that. If that conversation led to your understanding it somewhat differently, I'd love to hear a few words about that. And I'm going to give a much more, I don't know, much less fine-grained version of the same story and talk about that a little bit. But go ahead, Charlie.
Can you say of a particular, a primary substance, number one, that it is a particular, it has for its description and its essence a universal. I'm just trying to think of things that you can say about a substance, you know, about a primary substance. I'm not sure, but at any rate, I have one trivial non sequitur here. This course started on January 28th. January 28th in the liturgical calendar of the Roman Catholic Church is the feast of Thomas Aquinas. So we're in good company.
Oh, excellent.
Okay, sorry.
That's a good omen.
Yeah, but I was just thinking maybe that we could that you could say something very very basic about a substance. Maybe, I don't know.
Are you going to say something very basic about a substance, or are you asking that as a question?
Well, I'm just asking the question. You know, you can say at least that it is a particular,
Right.
and you can say that at least it possesses a universal, participates in the universal. You can say those two things. We're not there yet, I don't think, but I guess you could say that it is participating in a universal, that it does have existence. You could say perhaps those three things about
Well, yeah, that would be getting a little bit ahead, but
yeah.
Yeah. Actually,
I don't know.
It's actually hard to say, you know, what sense it would have existence. And that's one of those things, that's one of those words I'd just like to see banned for about 3 years. So people stop talking about existence.
Yeah.
And learn how to talk about being, right? Which just functions differently. But that, I know none of my wishes ever come true. So anyway, Tom, you're up. Thanks for raising your hand.
Okay, thank you. My contribution to this is this, the word this. I think if it can be said that it's this, whether this is a primary substance or anything else, because it's Jean's kindness is also a this, and it is also particular,
right?
But it is not Jean. So the this, if you can ever point to it, then it's something. Okay, that's it.
That threatens to veer into Samuel Johnson kicking rocks to refute idealists. I know that's not how you mean it. Go ahead and reply to that if you want. But I'm just pointing out a direction one could take that's probably not the direction you want to go. Tom, if you want to respond to that, go ahead.
No need to. No
okay.
need.
Thank you. Hey, you know, I want to say our group is dwindling wonderfully, and so I would like to now abolish my tier 1 and tier 2 rule, because there's no need for that anymore. Everybody's being incredibly concise and not getting us off track with long soliloquies about irrelevant stuff. So just feel free to now jump in and contribute, and don't feel like if you know something about Aristotle, your hands are tied and you can't really get into it. Okay, so I appreciate that. All right, that was amazing. There was a lot of overlapping, which is good. And Sandy, I'm going to just call you out because you're one of the people I was hoping would say something here, but it's totally cool if you don't want to. Can I call you out? Okay, it might not even be there right now. Okay, so what I want to pull out of all of that Aristotelian goodness is the idea that no matter what something is, no matter what anything, if anything is to be something, right, we are going to have to describe it in terms of its dependence relations. So everything is either going to be dependent on some other thing, or other things are going to be dependent on it. And the kinds of dependencies are not reciprocal. So there's going to be sharing. There's going to be sharing in some of these dependencies, but not in all of them. Okay, that's my very short version. So of anything that could possibly be, we had stars, atoms, stem cells, past civilizations, parts of the brain, right? No matter what, they're going to be, whatever they are, they're going to be determinable, or they're going to be knowable as dependent on something, or other things being dependent on it, and that whatever is particular about it is not going to be shared, and whatever is universal about it is going to be shareable, but only according to very specific relations. All right, so here we already have a very general understanding of being, but it's already a determinate one. It's not like anything can be anything. And it's not like, because everything is always changing and becoming other, we can never really know what's out there, right? That's the first thing I wanted to put my finger on, is just thinking about what something would have to be such that a judgment or a logos can be said of it. Already structures the field, not of language, but of being. And so the Greeks are already, or maybe the Greeks are prior to notions of subject and object that make knowledge, that give rise to skepticism, and make knowledge nothing but hypotheses that may or may not work or anything like that. I want to point out that this notion of language, and that only certain combinations of language will yield reference to something, and only certain, a smaller subset, will allow reference to reference in such a way that we can say true or false things about what is. Okay. Now, see, I'm gonna try to share screen here, and in order to help make my point. So hold on a sec. I'm kind of new at this. Start with this. Okay. Can everybody see that? Okay. So I'm using this the Greek terminology because it's sometimes clarifying. We got the T katatinos here. I'm going to increase it here. Whoops. Right? Something as something. Now, this is obviously language, something as something. But it's only when something is something, right? Has this relation, that it is possible to say what true or false things about it. And therefore, it's possible for there to be knowledge. So we are thinking, so language gives us a way of thinking about what knowledge would be, because knowledge is about what's true, and what's true is what is. So we get it being kind of through the back door here. And that's what's, I think, very perplexing for a lot of people who, in their first entry into metaphysics, they expect that we're going to somehow talk about immediately the things that present themselves to our senses. And what you will find over and over and over again is that the philosophical entryway into the question of being is over and over again the way in which language can be used so that being can be said in it. So this T katatino structure, it just really means something about something, is the structure of what is, insofar as what is can be true. insofar as what is something we can say anything about. Now, I know that opens the door, but what about all the stuff that we can't say anything about? Well, you can't say anything about it, so you can't say that there exists or there is any of this stuff, right? That's what you've done is you've imagined something beyond language, but you can't say it, because every time you say what that is, you're bringing it into language, and thereby you're determining it as something that is. So in the categories, Aristotle is interested in showing us that only expressions that are combined in certain ways can be affirmations, and only affirmations can be true or false. So it is, what I want to bring out here is that it is thinking about how any statement at all could be true or false. Thinking about the truth conditions of a statement, we arrive at true statements. The truth conditions of any statement are true. Therefore, since they're true, knowing them is knowing being. So that sounds like we're doing something other than describing the empirical world, and that's exactly right. We're not describing the empirical world at all. We are wondering, and we are finding out how, not just to describe what appears, but to find out what's true about what appears. Okay? And so there is always this detour through the predicative structure, through affirmation, through a specific combination of words that allow reference. And that the philosopher is going to get their first truth. And insofar as they're true, again, I'm repeating myself, but I think it's really important to always say this. Insofar as they're true, their knowledge of what is. And the point of the exercise is that we have been able, by looking at the way in which language combines in certain ways that allow reference, gives us a certain kind of knowledge, a very rudimentary knowledge, but a knowledge nonetheless, that whatever is going to be in dependence relationships that we can describe using four fundamental terms: substance, accidents, universals, and particulars. So we describe dependence relations with these terms. We are not saying there exists substances, or there exists universals, or there exists particulars, as if these four terms that we use to point out specific kinds of dependence relationships, as if they were four separate things kind of lying around in the universe somewhere, and we might stumble upon them and pick them up and say, oh, okay, here's this particular thing. This particular, it has nothing to do with the universals or accidents or substance. It's just its own thing. No, these four things are all mutually interrelated, and you can't have any of them without all of them. Each, to use a Hegelian expression, actually it's also a Neoplatonic expression, each is all. Each one of them is, for there to be substance, you need accidents, universals, and particulars. In order for there to be particulars, you need universals, substances, and accidents, and all the rest. So that takes pulls the rug out from underneath anybody who wants to say, well, there's particulars, but there's no universals, right? There exists, right, particulars out there, but no universals. But this is a fourfold interrelated conceptual web of concepts that all imply each other, and so cannot be disassociated or discombobulated from one another. And they are derived from exclusively thinking about what, so to speak, how must the world be such that a sentence can be true or false. And as you can tell, we haven't prejudiced anything, any content about that world. We haven't said that there are unicorns or there are no unicorns. We haven't said that there are stars or no stars. We haven't said that there are ghosts or no ghosts. We have not said anything specific like that. But anything that populates this universe is going to be in the dependence relations that are describable with substance, accidents, universals, and particulars. But I'm going to take a quick break and shut up for a little while. And I see Mike's hand, so go right ahead.
So, oh, I was going to read. Can you share?
Oh,
that?
yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
I got a couple other things I want to share. So sorry, I just took it down, but.
No worries. So yeah, knowledge finds expression in assertions and affirmations.
Mm-hmm.
So then the first thing I thought of, and I'm not saying it's a correct thought, but
yeah.
So what something is to be something is a combination, right? Like you can't just say man, right? There has to be a predicate, I guess. Man has two legs or whatever, right? But aren't we then, might we not risk going down the path of empiricism to verify that it's true? We need to rely on the senses. You know what I mean? Anyway.
Yeah, and a lot of people do throw Aristotle, I think erroneously, but in this so-called empiricist camp. And so what I would like to say is that this is not, so no experience can verify or falsify this because every experience presupposes it as the field of being. And so everything that we inquire into, we will inquire into what belongs to it specifically and what belongs to its relations with other things. And we will find that certain things imply what we're inquiring into and certain things don't imply what we're inquiring into. And so to speak, the methods of knowledge are only methods of knowledge because they are at the same time, they mirror the structure of what is. And so it's that kind of, one might call it a transcendental level, although I don't want to mix Kant into this. But there is no empirical way of finding out whether there are substance and accidents because you don't find substances or accidents lying around. We think about what things must be if there is to be knowledge of them. And knowledge of them is knowledge of their being. So we always take this detour through knowledge, the structure of knowledge, that predicative or that logos structure of knowledge that is spelt out here in terms of this fourfold interwoven conceptual scheme, substance, accidents, universal, particular. I don't know if that answered your question, but at least it gave me an opportunity to restate my thesis. Yeah, Tim.
So I'm kind of struggling with this a little bit.
Yeah, it's fine.
So are you, would you say then, I mean, are we to say that the unicorn, as you mentioned, has been?
No.
No. And on what grounds can we say it's not true? That like unicorns are not true if they have relations of universals, right? They do have universals. They do have accidents, but maybe not true accidents. So what is the criterion by which we determine that a unicorn, which has particulars and it has primary secondary substances, that it's not true?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can answer that without bringing in a lot of other Aristotelian metaphysics. So I'm just going to ask you to keep that in the back of your mind, and when we get more into the the inner structure of what it is to be a substance, I have a feeling that the relation of the causes and the relationship of matter and matter and form, will help us understand when something that seems distinct, like a unicorn, turns out to be a creature of fantasy or the imagination, and other things, even though they're also not ever perceivable, are actually belong to the lineaments or the structure of reality. So sorry, I'm going to take a rain check on that one.
Okay.
A promissory note. Sorry, Tim.
Well, if you take a rain check, then I reserve judgment.
Of course. Yeah. I wouldn't ask it any other way. Nick.
Yeah, Mike. So my question, I guess, is so in this universe of four things or four concepts, it seems like it's very focused on things, or what I call nouns. So I'm wondering where the verb comes in, where the motion, the action, the things happening in the world and so forth.
Right.
Where are they in this universe?
No, that's an excellent question, and it's going to be one of the reasons why there's why this categorical scheme is going to not be repeated in the metaphysics, right. So, I mean, the way in which motion is partly accounted for in this categorical scheme is a question of whether it is merely right. So the categorical scheme is how are we to conceive of anything, not in terms of its perceptual qualities, but in terms of its being, right? And of course, everybody knows, like the dream arguments or something like that often perceptual qualities don't correspond to the way things are. And we know in science that the way atoms are have nothing to do with the way in which things that compose out of atoms and molecules ultimately appear in their perceptual qualities. So we're all fairly comfortable with the reality of something being very different from the perceptual qualities. And Aristotle. What Aristotle is not doing, and this is one of the reasons why I'm really not an empiricist, at least in any bad sense, he's not taking the things of experience and then looking at their relations and then generalizing them and saying, that's how all things are. Like that. So that would be a fallacious generalization. But what he's doing is instead is looking at, He's doing Socrates' second saline. He's looking at the logos in order to understand what the being is of things above and beyond the way they appear. And right. And so I just wanted to point this out as we're going to count. And if you stick with me, we're going to see this a lot in future philosophers. This turn towards predication, predication is just another word for judgment. And judgment is just a linguistic combination that allows for a linguistic a statement to be true or false. And that's exactly what he says at the beginning. Man, horse is neither true nor false because we haven't said anything of it yet. Once we say something about it, we say, the horse is in the field, the horse eats grass or something like that. Then that's something that can be true or false. And depending, Mike, this gets back to the empiricist thing, depending on the kind of statement we deliver, we might need empirical methods to find that out. Do horses eat grass? Empirical inquiry. Are horses animals? Not so empirical, right? It's also conceptual because it depends on how animals understood. Tim.
Well, I mean, if what you're saying is true, that in order for something to be anything, or for anything to be something, it must have its being in this interrelationship between universals, particulars, accidents, and substances, then to say unicorn implies all of those predications already. So is a unicorn true? Is to say does a unicorn have a horn in the center of its head? And of course, yes, you can't say unicorn without the implication of that horn on its head. So, it's almost impossible to even, and this is even getting to the notion of combination, it's impossible to even say one thing without implying more than one thing, because you're implying all of these relationships. You're implying accidents, you're implying secondary substances, universals. So it's impossible for there not to be a combination, even if you only.
Right. But I mean, I just want to say that these are conditions of statements being true or false. And it's not like any combination that meets the criteria of being a judgment is automatically true. And so, so I kind of want to insist on that, because we're looking at the conditions of any linguistic statement being true or false, which means some or many of the things that we say, obeying all the rules, are nevertheless false. And so that opens up to the possibility that there is a way to know that unicorns don't have any material being, even though they have ideal being or something like that. Garth, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was going to comment on this unicorn example. I randomly came across like a bunch of there's a whole class a guy is teaching on truth in fiction. I came upon this because I was trying to look up a paper by somebody called Truth in Fiction, and it turns out there's a lot of papers with that title. But anyway, one of them like goes into this whole thing about Sherlock Holmes, and in one of the Sherlock Holmes stories, there's a case that Sherlock Holmes solves by showing that a snake had climbed up a rope. But it turns out that the kind of snake that I forget Arthur Conan Doyle wrote into that story can't climb ropes. In the real world, they can't climb ropes. So then, the question of truth in fiction is really sort of a fraught question. But I think if we don't have some idea of unicorns and dragons and things like that, then the stories that we read about them wouldn't be intelligible. I think it's not just about, is it here in the empirical world? It's about, can we make sense of it at all? And I think that's a question you have to ask first.
Right. So, I mean, obviously, no, we can go way down the garden path with unicorns. So I'm going to resist the temptation. But please, as details emerge about what Aristotle thinks, please re-ask the question and reformulate it and push back against Aristotle. I think it's a great way to understand. Garth, your hand's still up. Have you not taken it down, or do you want to follow up?
No, that's all I had to say. Maybe I should try to find the link to that one paper I was looking at. It's sort of interesting.
Cool. So, well, okay, I'm going to go through this really kind of quickly. This also in response to Sandy's concerns about this kind of inquiry just not having any real meaning or purpose, or has no cash value, so to speak. And I just wanted to I just wrote down some thoughts here that I want to share with you, just to show how I think that this has one of the this is the kind of thought that Aristotle leads you to have that may well make you a better person. Okay, so I start this off by saying abstract differences of the kind that we've been discussing enable better understanding of the sensible world and help us engage more justly with the world of the senses. All right, so we're not talking about Gene anymore. We're talking about my dog. And I wanted to point out a distinction that is not an empirical distinction. And yet it's a very meaningful distinction. And it's not an empirical, or it's not a physical distinction. It is, we're going to call it a metaphysical distinction. And it's a metaphysical distinction that we all employ in our lives. And I just wanted to bring it out a little bit as the kind of thing that you can use Aristotle to get clear about, right? So I want to distinguish between the life my dog has and his life, or his dog life.
Text bigger?
Huh?
Can you make the text bigger, please?
Sure. If I let me see here. Somebody want to tell me how,
Make them, just string that window together so that there are no margins around your paper.
Yeah, yeah, there you go.
okay, so is that better?
Yeah, it's much better on our side anyway.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of read this, and then if you have some comments, great. Mike, did you want to get a point in before I start reading? It's totally cool.
I think I can defer to the after party. So yeah.
Okay, is it about unicorns? Yeah, unicorns are now after party topic.
It's about triangles, but it could be classed as a unicorn.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to read this. Animal owners usually protect the lives of their animals. We encounter cases in life when animals are euthanized, even if they could continue to live, right? Is there a contradiction here? Is this an act of violence to euthanize your dog when it could still live? Right? Do we do violence to our animals by shortening their lives? And here I want to point out, dog's life as a term is homonymous. There's dog's life as life that animals have, and there's dog life as this dog's life, this substance. When I leash my dog so we won't run in front of cars, I say I'm protecting his life. But is it life or this dog life that I'm protecting? So to begin to answer this question, I have these thoughts. As he ages, I will have to choose if and when to euthanize my dog. If I consider life to not just be essential to my dog, but his substance as well, then any form of taking his life is an act of violence against this animal. Violence here means to deprive something of its substance, its true being. Yet as he suffers, he can no longer do what he has done all his life. He is alive, but unable to live his dog life. The way he lives, the way he uses his body, the way he interacts with his friends and environment, not only to live like any other dog, but to live the life of a dog in an utterly particular way. The life he shares with all other animals, cows and humans and flies. This is the universal life. But his life is his alone. It cannot be said of anything else. It cannot be in anything else, to use Aristotle's terms. When my dog can no longer live his dog life, I would do violence to him by treating him as if only his life mattered and not his dog life. It is violence to keep him in a state where he cannot be in accord with his substance. Life is indeed essential to dog life, but it is not identical to dog life. And I wrote that down just thinking, what is this substance this particular substance that Aristotle keeps talking about? And I wrote this just trying to illustrate, right, that it's not a thing. It is a way of being. There's not like substances out there and their accidents are elsewhere or something like that, but rather Aristotle's getting at a kind of activity, a way of being, a unity, a way of integrating body and environment and other dogs and other people that is unique to my dog. And so with the help of the distinctions that Aristotle gives, we can see that I would be treating my dog as merely as kind of abstraction, as having general life, and that would be a substance, and so therefore I should keep him alive at all costs, because otherwise I'd be doing violence to him. But if I see that it's dog life that I'm trying to protect and not just life that he has in common with all our animals, right? Then the basis of my evaluation of when I'm causing needless suffering changes. And so, yeah, I see some comments. I hope this kind of focuses your mind on, it's not just about this horse or this this man Socrates, but it's the way of being this universal thing horse. It's the way of being this universal thing man that is the particular substance that everything else depends on. And this way of being is not ever empirically given. All right, Tim, then Sandy.
Well, I'm going to kind of defer to Sandy more because I've been talking and she hasn't, but I will say I find this very disturbing, the way it's written here. And I know that you're trying to make a point about, you know, what kind of cash we can get from these distinctions, but
yeah,
I could very easily just say, well, you know what, a dog that doesn't have its fourth leg doesn't have an adequate dog life, and I'm going to exterminate it. And a human who is, you know, has an IQ of 70 isn't an adequate human life. So I'm not going to value it. So I think this is problematic, but I don't think you're trying to go that direction with this, but maybe that's a discussion for later. But yeah, I find this very disturbing.
Okay, no, thanks. I appreciate it. Sandy.
With this example, I guess I have problems for a different reason, because we're introducing choice here. And from my understanding in this scenario, we wouldn't have a choice for life. The only choice we would have would be this dog's life. Like I don't go out and I just wave my hand and everything alive can just die, you know, in my wake, like some super villain. Like I don't like that life. I have no, like if I suddenly got hit by a car and I was just like a vegetable and in a horrible state and I was like wanting to just end it, I would actually continue just living. Like it seems to be beyond our ability to choose the one life that you mentioned here. And so it seems to me that we can only make choices around this life. I don't know if this makes sense to anybody, but I mean, none of us, like, even if you didn't agree with dogs' life in the universal sense, like, I don't want dogs to exist. Like, I say I hate them. They should just be around. I can't do anything about that. Like, I can't. I mean, I could try, I guess. It could be some Cruella de Vil and try to go around and kill all dogs, but I actually have no power over that. Basically, the only choice I can make would be in a particular instance, right? So, I mean, I understand the distinctions you're trying to make here. I just think as usual, being the anti-will person that I am,
right,
want to piss all over the idea that we actually have a choice there as to one or the other.
Right. Yeah. No. Right. I just I want to say that this distinction is something that we act on all the time, and it's not hidden from us, and yet it's very hard to bring out this distinction and get us focused on the fact that I'm not, right? That I'm worried, when I'm worried about my dog, I'm not worried about life as such. I'm worried about this dog's life, and that's why when this dog can no longer live this dog's life and suffers accordingly, that's a different kind of a different kind of suffering that I'd be doing violence to. We judge the particular all the time, but we need to know how the particular is figuring in Aristotle's account. And for me, this was clarifying. And if it's not clarifying, don't worry about it. But since it was clarifying to me, I thought it might aid us thinking about these particulars, right? This world of particulars that Aristotle is giving us is not like a world of atoms. It's not a world of atoms, and it's not a world of things sitting around. It's a world of acts that are logically prior to the matter that allows the act to take place. It's not the matter that's acting. And so And so these particulars are very peculiar things. And by saying it this way, I thought maybe we could get at the act character, the dog life character of the particular. Okay, got a couple hands. And then after we've done this, I promise we're going to get to some Aristotle texts. Okay, let me see. I saw Tyler first, and then Sandy, then Nick.
Yeah, I think a helpful way to think about this is that for human beings, right, we have an understanding of what kinds of life we think are bad for them. And there are lives which we would say are almost not the life of a human being. So one of the more horrible examples, right, is, children who are, kept in a basement somewhere, who don't develop language and so forth. So we kind of want to say, well, there's no way to treat a human being, but that human being is still alive. So we're not concerned specifically with the violence to life as such. We're concerned with the violence to this kind of living being.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to be concerned with that, we have to have some account of what kind of human being or what kind of living being that is. I meant to say living being, not human being, but human being would be a kind of living being. And in order to make all kinds of ethical judgments, right? Even if we can get these horribly wrong, and of course, we can get things wrong in the pursuit of getting things right. It's better to do it than not, right? Because there's going to be worse violence if you don't make the effort.
Cool. Sandy.
Yeah, I mean, not to say something more positive. I do want to say that I understand the example you provided and what it's trying to make us see, because I'm just to take this same example and apply it to people, right? That there's life or human life in general, or in the universal sense, but then there's the individual, like this life of one person. And there certainly are people who don't realize that actually. They think their own, this life is all life, right? And maybe don't understand that and therefore act very selfishly, for example, because they cannot comprehend that other people also share something, that they're taking part of. So that, and I think that can be mind-blowing right there, just for some, there's stories written where, I don't know, like A Christmas Carol, or something like that, where the entire revelation is the character realizing that, so I don't think it's a bad example. I know I was kind of saying negative, like when you take out the whole decision making part. I think, yeah, go ahead.
No, take out the what?
The part about having to make the choice. I think just looking at it in terms of realizing that there's a greater life, and then the this life is already a huge step in thinking, just for some people, or maybe all of us, but
I think
for some
us,
people
really.
that would already be some kind of mind-blowing understanding, so it's not a bad example in that sense, and I understand what you're trying to make us see, so I just trying to
I appreciate that. Thanks. Nick and then Mike.
Yes, I understand the example. I think I do, but I do believe though that because it may not be Aristotle's logic and so forth may not be the right tool for this particular example. Would be my comment. And the reason I say that is because, well, you talked about truth or falsity of a statement, and this is where you apply that. But what we're talking about in this case is an action to be done, not a truth of something or a fact of something. but rather an action, a prescription, a practical thing. And you are making the truth at this point. You're not discovering the truth. And therefore, it doesn't quite apply, this particular tool, not the best tool to use. When it comes to life of a person or any being, it is one of more of empathy, one of asking oneself, what would I do if I were in that person or that uh, place? Would I tolerate the suffering, or should I end the suffering? Would I want the suffering to end? That is not a logical question or a truth or false question. So as I say, Aristotle made a comment. You use the proper tool for what you need. In mathematics, you need precision. But if you're talking day-to-day life, you don't want that precision, the 0.001 stuff. Use what's practical. In this particular case, I think I know what you're saying, Michael, but the particular example is not, this is not how I would use Aristotle's logic in metaphysics. It would be, I would use his Nicomachean ethics or something of that sort, you know, more on this. And I think that applies better for that, is my comment.
Thank you. I was thinking more about the criteria of the decision, and the one can also ask oneself, you know, why be empathetic? Why is that relevant to the kind of decision we're making? And what I want to say is that these kinds of assumptions need justifications, and ultimately the justification is going to be anchored in the kind of being we're confronted with. And whether it's a being that requires an ethical stance or a technological stance or whatever, right? And so it's not. So I was trying to get into what it is that is actually relevant for thinking about it. Now, a person with an IQ of 70 might not be the best person to ask how to make this distinction and what to do about it. I do want to say that. That these are criteria for thinking about the problem, not for solving the problem. But if we miss this distinction, we will forever be, for instance, sustaining life at all cost and ignoring this dog life thing. And so we will pretend to be just and decent when in fact we will be cruel and violent. And that's the point that I want to make, that this kind of distinction helps us see cruelty where otherwise we wouldn't see it. Mike, go ahead.
Okay, actually that helps. I guess I'm in the rare camp where I don't think I understand the example, but not how it helps in light of the question that started this meetup. But I do, like, what I do see is you're distinguishing between two types of life. One is the universal and one is the particular. And I think you're trying to point out that in this case, your moral decision on how to act needs to be focused on the particular life of Jackson, not the universal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I'm trying to connect it to the question at the beginning. What does it mean for something to be something?
Oh, right. Yeah. So really, it was an attempt to elucidate how to think about particular substance. And what's weird about thinking about particular substance is that it's, the life of the dog. The life of a dog is universal, but this way of being a dog is particular. And so we kind of use the same words to designate the universal and the particular, but this expression "way" or this way of being, it gets at helps us. Just helps us see the particularity of this. It's not just a pile of universals. It is a unique integration of universals, and that integration isn't one of the universals. It's the substance. All right. Yeah. So does that help? I mean, that's just another way of saying it. And your questions are great, and they help me clarify this even better. And I didn't actually have the thought before that the integration of universals is the particular, and it's not one universal, another universal that we add to this heap here. but it's another mode of being. It's not another thing, it's another mode of being. And it's the one that connects, integrates these other modes of being that we are calling accidents and universals. Tim.
Yeah, I just want to say I've kind of softened a little bit on my position there. I mean, I think it's very subject to abuse.
Yes.
But still the principle holds is that true being must be taken into account for ethical decisions. And so when in your case, you know, let's say somebody wants to commit suicide because they have only 3 weeks to live anyway, and they're just racked with cancer and they want a doctor to help them end their life. It may be violent not to allow them to do that without stigma. And so in that case, yes. But still, I think we have to be very, very careful. I mean, as no matter what ethical standard we're using, I think it always can be cut the wrong way too. And
indeed, no, I wouldn't want to deny that. Yeah, I mean, and just to follow up on Nick, because Nick brought up the very important and very relevant point of empathy. Empathy can be used as an excuse for not doing things too, right? So empathy can also be unethical, and it's not automatically good. So we get into these kind of deliberations, but whenever we deliberate about these things, we're making distinctions, and if we're not clear about the level of distinction. Sorry, I'll just finish the sentence. I don't want you to talk. We're not clear about the level of distinction, the kind of distinction, and if we're not clear that how to talk about the being of something, then all we do is we throw a blanket of prejudice and bias and assumption over the situation, and we never gain clarity.
So I think part of the problem is because of the example, which is an ethical situation, is that we've come down to the basic debate that's gone on from, I don't know whose time, Hume's time maybe, what is the basis of morality? And there's one camp which I belong to, which says that the basis of morality is compassion, that we suffer, and empathy. That is the main basis of what is right or wrong. And then there's the other camp, which is more Kantian and says, oh no, the basis of morality is because there are these absolutes of right and wrong based on logic and so forth. Right. So I don't subscribe to that. I do not subscribe to that. I think that's a wrong-headed thing. But anyway, that's the basic assumption that
action from any universal principle. I want to defend myself a little bit here. Right? I know the difference between theoretical and practical philosophy, but I also know that practical philosophy is based on distinctions. And if we want those distinctions to track being, right, then we're going to have to have a very, very close relationship between ethics and ontology, and not separate them into two completely separate independent spheres. At least this would be my Aristotelian argument. Now, I might, as a human being, as me personally, I might not be an Aristotelian. I'm not confessing anything here. It's not about me, people. It's about Aristotle.
As I say, I know where you're getting at, and I understand your example. I'm just pointing out. If you had picked a non-ethical example, it would have hit the nail more.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Nick. I appreciate that, but I do know that philosophy is always a minefield, and you're always going to land in one. So just I can roll with this. But if it helps you make it understand what is a particular, and whatever a particular is, it's going to gain its contour by the relationship between substance and universal in particular, universal an accident. And we don't have, Aristotle doesn't give us any license to go outside of this framework and start borrowing notions from other spheres or whatever, other uses of the word particular to find out what particulars are. He says that he says that, you know, that this is a fourfold distinction, and it's based solely on the evidence that he gives, which is the kind of combination that allows an affirmation to be stated. An affirmation is something that can be true or false. So as I said, anything that is necessary for there to be statements that are true or false is itself true. And here we've backed into the back door of the truth of being, not by staring at things, but by this kind of abstract inquiry that Aristotle has given us in the categories, and then will continue to do in the metaphysics. Okay. It's 5:30. I hope this conversation has been illuminating for people. It's been all about Aristotle, and it takes a while to get into Aristotle. I know that people would like to be more text centered, and when the dust is settled and we're more familiar with these distinctions, it seems to me like we can be more text centric, which may already be next time. But I did want to thank you very much for your time writing about what anything would have to be in order to be something. Before I move on, I want to check in with Peter to make sure that, since he can't raise his hand, is there anything that popped up that you want to? Okay, thanks. Okay, awesome. Let's look at the metaphysics. Oh, sorry. I do not have a screen share for the metaphysics. Does anybody have? Can somebody do that for me? Oh, sorry. Oh, that'd be Bo or Peter.
Yeah, Peter, do you have it?
So, Book Alpha, he talks a little bit about knowledge, and then he talks about causes. And so our first task is to understand what these two things have to do with one another. So let's read out loud some passages and talk about them. First, we're going to get a sense of what he has to say about knowledge and why he started his metaphysics talking about knowledge. Now, I emphasize knowledge a lot because I think it's the fundamental metaphysical starting place, and it's not just Aristotle who thinks that, but people often think that you have to start talking about things right away, independently of knowledge. But just like with the detour through the predication, we also have to take a detour through knowledge in order to find out what metaphysical knowledge would be and what kind of thing would be the object of metaphysical knowledge. We can't just decree that such and such is what the science of metaphysics is about. All right, thank you very much. Who, just so I can listen to somebody else's voice but my own, would somebody mind just taking that first paragraph and reading it out loud?
I can read.
Perfect, thanks.
The one with all humans by nature. I guess so, that's the first paragraph. All humans by nature desire to know. An indication of this is our liking for the perceptual capacities. For even apart from their utility, these are liked because of themselves, and most of all, the one because of the eyes. For it is not only in order to do an action, but even when we are not going to do anything whatsoever, that we choose sight over, one might almost say, all the others. The cause of this is that of all perceptual capacities, it enables us to know most fully and makes clear many differences. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. I wanted to just point out that the very first sentence is all humans by nature desire to know. I would like to point out that this desire kind of etymologically is related to tending or stretching out. So one way to understand this is that all human beings, by their physi, by their nature, they extend themselves like a plant to the sun. We extend ourselves to knowledge. Okay, so it's not so much that there's this desire inside of us and it palpitates, because I don't know if anybody here really feels that desire the way we talk about desires. So I wanted to get away a little bit away from this notion of desire as this urge inside of us, and think of it as the fulfillment of human nature is toward knowledge, is extending towards knowledge and attaining a knowledge. And we're going to find out that there's a special kind of knowledge that is the best fulfillment of that. Tyler.
Yeah, I was gonna mention this. This is something that makes humans very different from other animals, because the desire to know, first of all, requires that they, in a sense, have some something outside themselves that they're reaching towards. And they are not satisfied simply by having themselves maintained or by bodily pleasures.
Right.
And they also have a capacity to ask questions and not accept what they are given simply because it provides them pleasure or maintains their body.
But that's an important point, because desire is often related to even those bodily desires. So it's important to make that distinction. I don't want to go too far into this knowledge thing, because this can be a pretty confusing text, and I'd rather talk about it in the context, well, after we've gotten more information about knowledge. I did want to point out, right, at the very last sentence that Mike read, why do we prefer sight? We prefer sight because it enables us to know most fully. And what does that mean? Right? It makes clear many differences. Aristotle is giving us some information about what he considers knowledge to be, or the kind of knowledge that he is inquiring into. I realize there's lots of definitions of knowledge out there, but we have to just be attentive to the sense in which Aristotle is taking knowledge, because he thinks that this sense that he gives it will yield the most philosophical fruit. Right? So we see that the point is not to name things, as we said before, right? Knowledge is not, there's a book, there's a couch, there's a lamp, right? But making clear many differences. So differences, making discriminations, making differences, finding out how those differences are related. That's where he's beginning to lead us. Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something quickly about that last line.
Great.
Because in the commentary from Aquinas, he makes a lot of great points about this. He talks about how with other senses, other than sight, there's some part of the thing that is coming towards you. Like, for example, like with taste, there's something that's hitting your saliva. With smell, there's something, particle in the air, it's coming into your nose.
Mm-hmm.
But with sight, nothing leaves the object, so you actually see the full entire thing.
Ah, great observation.
Yeah, just wanted to mention that. I think it's really nifty.
Yeah, I kind of want to roll with it. On the other hand, I'm looking at the time, and so
yeah.
But it's a great observation. Of course, it makes you think of Husserl, who's always talking about my perception of the chair is only one side of the chair, but it's not like some part of the chair. The chair is somehow in the perception, partly as what's given and partly as the absent backside, right? That we can't see, but that backside's not completely absent from our perception, but it's somehow in its absence present in the perception. So I think that's super interesting, because there is a sense in which sight and what comes from light gives us a whole, whereas the other senses give us very small parts of things. And it's for that reason that it's no surprise that often knowledge and grasping of things is seeing light or seen clearly. We use visual metaphors all the time when we describe knowledge. We don't use olfactory ones. That tells us something. All right, so we're going to talk. So we're going to skip a paragraph, and what we're going to do is we're going to just talk a little bit about what Aristotle considers to be animal knowledge, and how what he calls craft knowledge and rational calculation are different. So, if Mike, do you want to just skip a paragraph and then read out loud now the other animals?
Yep. Now, the other animals live by appearances and memories, and have but a small share in experience, whereas humankind lives also by craft knowledge and rational calculations. From memories, experience comes about in humans, since many memories of the same thing finally bring about the capacity of one experience. Indeed, experience seems pretty much similar to scientific knowledge and craft knowledge. But scientific knowledge and craft knowledge come to humans through experience. For experience made craft, as Polis says, and lack of experience, luck.
Thanks. Let's talk about who has a thought about experience, about how he's using experience here. It's different than the way we use experience. And so let's bring that out so we don't get confused down the road. So I got a couple hands. Charlie, I'll put you in the
Okay.
Sandy and then Charlie.
Mhm.
I was just gonna say, when he means experience made craft, I think he's trying to say that it's not random. That it's not just bumbling around out, in the world and stumbling on things that you acquire this knowledge, but there's some kind of some already order to what you're looking for, I guess, in the experience. Is that what he means? Or I'm assuming that's what he means in my horrible bumbling term.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, well, let's hear some more, and then we'll get to what the text at least gives us to understand. Charlie, you want to follow up?
Well, I was just going to say, I'm not sure when I read this that I got a clear picture of the difference between the very placement of experience and craft knowledge. It seems to me that craft knowledge depends on experience, and experience are kind of isolated incidents. But then at one point on the next page, he says, the person with experience is able to function practically, whereas the craft person is not. So I'm sorry, I should have not even said anything. I'm
okay. No, it's all good.
I've not contributed anything.
Well, that's not true, but I'm going to go on to Tim. Yes, no, I just wanted to respond to Sandy. Yeah, always have the Greek text. If you can read a little Greek, always have the Greek text open. It's even if you don't understand every word, it's very clarifying. So go ahead, Tim.
So it seems like he's making a distinction between experience and craft knowledge in the next paragraph, which we haven't read yet. But
right,
experience,
get an experience.
Experience seems to be like repetitive, passive intake, and then craft knowledge is making a categorical or universal, having a universal understanding that is the collection of, or that is the result of all of those kind of almost passive kinds of intakes.
Yeah.
And then that categorical supposition about all of them together becomes kind of a useful, that can be a useful bit of knowledge that can be then applied to certain intentional product making.
Yeah.
I just want to get in line because nobody's noticing me.
Well, thanks. Yeah, no, yeah. Thanks for doing that, Peter, because your picture is often down. I can't
Yeah.
see it. And so you just have to just vocalize it. I appreciate that. We'll go Tyler, then Peter.
Tyler better not steal my point. That's all I gotta say.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm gonna try not to. I think the first sentence here gives us an important clue because he says other animals live by appearances and memories and have but a small share in experience. So experience is going to not just be appearances or memories. It's going to have to do with the organization or form of unity of them.
Yeah.
And so he says here, many memories of the same thing finally bring out the capacity of one experience. So something in the content of the human life has to be recognized as being the same throughout many different appearances and memories. And that sameness is going to be what allows, or part of what allows, scientific and craft knowledge.
Good. Peter.
Tyler basically stole my point, but I was just going to read that sentence. From memories, experience comes about in humans, since many memories of the same thing finally bring about the capacity of one experience. And he also has this, like the physics, there are some animals that don't have the capacity for memory, so they couldn't have any experience. Everything they meet is essentially either new or it's just a instinctual thing.
Right.
There's no buildup of any low-level wisdom on anything.
Okay, so how is he using experience? So experience is obviously it arises from sub-experiential events, appearances, memories. The appearance of something is not the experience of it, right? Right, because something can be other than it appears. And so it's only through repeated exposure to appearances and memory, and there's a distillation process through this many memories and many appearances. There's a distillation process of them being about, he says, one thing, right? But of course, it's many things that are each of them one thing. And once we're able to determine what the one thing is, right, we have now experience. So experience is not something that just happens to you. It's not just open your eyes and you're experiencing. Okay, that's just living by appearances. But the beginning of determining what things are begins in finding out what's one about them. And that is just another looser way of beginning to say, getting at their substance. All right, so we have experience, okay, go ahead, Tim.
I just want to say, I just don't quite get that. I'm not sure if I'm agreeing with him on that, because he says many memories of the same thing finally bring about the capacity of one experience.
Right.
I don't get how capacity functions in that sentence.
Yeah.
And it's also, I don't get why many memories are necessary to experience, because he does distinguish between experience and craft knowledge, which he says craft knowledge comes about when from many intelligible objects, and that kind of, for me, corresponds to many memories belonging to experience, one universal supposition. That's where the unity comes, is in craft knowledge about similar things comes about. So I'm not getting it. Like, what it's either there is no distinction between memory and experience, or there's no distinction between craft knowledge and experience, but not both. I'm not following this at all.
I see Peter, and then we'll go Greg and Sandy.
I think craft knowledge is beyond, is a step above experience, because it has the universal, it has the why, as it were. It has an account of things, which takes it up a level. He also goes through a lot of that in the posterior analytics. And I think we also see it further on in sections in the metaphysics here too.
Right. So we're looking at stages in knowledge, right? Stages in which knowledge comes to completion. The idea, of course, being that it comes to completion in knowing why, knowing the cause, right? So this is an inquiry into cause, because causes are what complete and perfect and consummate knowledge. So we're looking at the levels here that of
yeah. Okay. So then what is experience?
From least unified to the most unified knowledge. So sorry.
So okay. So then is experience kind of what is it then? Is it the ability to predict what is based on previous memories, or what is it?
Well, I think it's. I think the short answer is that one experience is experience of some one thing, and by virtue that has been precipitated out of the many appearances, perceptual appearances, and the many and the many memories. Right? There's some stable one that it would be the one experience. That's my first attempt, and that isn't knowing. That's not being able to give an account of what it is, but rather only that that the unity of something is experienceable, but not yet sayable. We need higher order knowledge to do that. Okay, so we got Greg, Sandy, and Richard.
This sounds like straightforward induction or reasoning by analogy. You need the memory to hold on to the past encounters and to let them start building up so that you can see some connection. And I think reasoning by analogy is the same thing as a straightforward induction by enumeration, but the analogy aspect would be recognizing what's relevantly similar about those experiences. And so that thing that you've been calling, I guess, unity or stable one is what a mundane learning from the past by adding similar situations together with memory, or good old reasoning by analogy.
Right. I like the similarity point you made. That's kind of what's being precipitated out of all of these different various activities. Go ahead, Sandy. Sandy?
I was just, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
I wasn't really that confused about the relationship between these terms. From my understanding, he's similar to what Greg just said. He's kind of just showing us the stages, kind of like that, or what is preceding one thing or what has to be present in order another thing. And from my understanding, he was just saying that this experience basically has to be there before scientific knowledge and craft knowledge can come about, or that they're built. When he says experience made craft knowledge, he means that, experience made craft. That would mean that the experience has moved from being just that, but, has built up into a craft. So it's just, that was just my understanding of it. I know Tim was confused, and I guess I just wanted to point that out, because I think he's just trying to show kind of I don't know what the word is, but the procession of these things, or the way that they're kind of layering on top of each other in order for one thing to be. So yeah.
I agree. Thank you. Richard, and then Tim.
So I'll give a stab at this, and I could be off, but so I'm sort of reading into how his definition of experience is like sort of a competency in an area, kind of a how-to, and then lays a foundation later for craft knowledge and scientific knowledge, which is more the why, I guess.
Yep.
That's sort of I don't understand the final sentence of the paragraph, if that whether that works or not, but that's sort of where I'm trying to put a finger on it right now, I guess. Oh, I guess key of it is also that it's a cumulative based on the memories of working in that area. So competency in an area, I guess.
Right. I mean, he is making the point, right, that experience seems pretty much similar to scientific knowledge and craft knowledge, right? So it's easy to conflate these. And so what we have here in experience looks kind of like craft knowledge and kind of like scientific knowledge, but he's going to make further distinctions in order to show the difference. Right. So Tim, and then maybe we can read about craft knowledge, and then we will disband today and take it up next time.
Yeah, I just want to say that I don't think that Aristotle would agree that craft knowledge is knowing. Why? Because in the coming paragraphs he makes the distinction that craft knowledge is the kind of knowledge that you just do it and you can produce things, but you don't know the scientific. You don't have the wisdom behind that knowledge to know why.
Okay, let's read it. Let's read it, and then and then meditate on it for a couple minutes, and then disband for today and take it up again tomorrow. Can I get a reader for craft knowledge there in the middle of the page?
I'll read it.
Beautiful, thank you.
Craft knowledge comes about when, from many intelligible objects belonging to experience, one universal supposition about similar things comes about. Or to have a supposition that when Callias was sick with this disease, this treatment benefited him, and similarly with Socrates and many other particular cases, is a matter of experience. But to suppose that it benefited everyone of a certain sort, marked off by a single form, suffering from a certain disease, for example, phlegm-filled or bilious people when burning with a fever, is a matter of craft. Should I keep going?
Let's stop there. Tim, do you have your hand up because you wanted to respond, or you just not put it down yet?
I just haven't put it down yet.
Okay. So to have a supposition that when Callias was sick with this disease, this treatment benefited him, and similarly with Socrates and many other cases, is a matter of experiences. So what I'm understanding here is that that we have a connection. We have a connection between treatment, disease, and this individual, right? These are all three different things met with in very different contexts, but to understand them as one, right? As belonging together, as related or connected, right? That is what experience yields. And that's why he distinguishes what experiences is from just having memories or living by appearances. Right. So there's that connection. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I think here he's also making another subtle point with the Callias thing, like that something fixed Callias is one experience. Yeah. Something fixed Polus or Socrates is a different experience.
Right.
But the craft comes in knowing that can be universalized to anybody beyond just the experience, my two separate experiences.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And so I don't think that anything, with craft knowledge, I recognize the universal, right? The treatment helps them not because they're Callias or Socrates, but because they're human, right? And so here we've got the introduction of the universal to this this connection that experience gives us. Experience gives us connections, and craft knowledge is higher order because it grasps the connection in terms of something universal and shareable, rather than just a bunch of accidents. Anybody want to comment on that?
Yeah, I'll just say that isn't the why yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's read on, and then I just want to get to the cause, so if possible. I know people need to leave at 6, but Sandy, do you mind continuing to read with a view to action?
Okay. With a view to action, then, experience seems no different from craft knowledge. On the contrary, we even see experienced people being more successful than those who have an account but are without experience. The cause of this is that experience is knowledge of particulars, whereas craft knowledge is of universals. And actions and productions are all concerned with particulars. For the doctor does not cure a human except coincidentally, but Callias or Socrates or someone else spoken of in that way who happens coincidentally to be a human. If then someone without experience has the account and knows the universal, but does not know the particular included under it, he will often make an error in treatment, since it is the particular that admits of treatment.
Go ahead and read the next short paragraph and we'll stop reading for today. We'll just talk about this.
Nevertheless, we regard knowledge and comprehension as characteristic of craft rather than of experience, and take it that craftsmen are wiser than experienced people, on the supposition that in every case wisdom follows along rather with knowledge than with experience. This is because craftsmen know the cause, whereas experienced people do not. For experienced people know the that, but do not know the why, whereas craftsmen know the why, that is the cause.
Mm-hmm. All right, so there it is. Craftsman knows the why.
But he does, I think we maybe need to go into the other paragraph. We won't do it today, but I think he makes it a further distinction though, where the crafts, anyway, we'll wait till we get there.
He talks about the handicraft, which is lower than the craft.
Right. Hey, Richard, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a little bit tangential, but I'll keep it short. One of my high school teachers, who also kind of gave us an introduction to epistemology and whatnot, and logic, he was very particular to distinguish between medical doctors, use of doctor in a medical doctor sense, and also a use of doctor in PhD in that. So say if we say that scientific knowledge is above craft knowledge, then those who are medical doctors have this craft knowledge, although in our society it's sort of that's sort of a weird way to think about it just because doctors are so revered. But then separately, it's still possible to even above that have a PhD in medicine, which requires even further training. I guess so I'm not sure, I'm just speaking out loud kind of in reaction to this. I'm not sure if I have a point or not, but anyway,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. There's theoretical physics and then there's practical physics. There's theoretical linguistics and there's practical linguistics. And I think that's the distinction that's coming in the next paragraph, is that I think he uses the term theoretical, but at least, and I would imagine that would be in the Greek as well. Yeah, so the very last sentence before A2 is, so it is clear that theoretical wisdom is scientific knowledge of certain sorts or of starting points and causes.
Yep. All right, let's make that the first topic of conversation next time. How do we distinguish hopefully we've got more or less sense of experience as being different than being exposed to appearances, because of the way in which we determine connections that go beyond any one appearance, and that the craft. So the next thing we need to do is distinguish between craft knowledge and scientific knowledge, so that we can understand what he's trying to do in this book, right? Because what he's trying to do in this book is find out whether there is a science of this highest knowledge. What is known in this highest knowledge? Causes. Is there a science of it? And the first half of this book is just trying to determine whether there is anything to be said in a unified manner about being, and being as known through causes. Okay. So that's what we kind of have to We're going to keep knowledge in sight, because knowledge is knowledge of being is knowledge of causes. It's easy to get lost in talking about being and cause and forgetting that this is all linked together in a certain kind of knowledge that he wants to show is the highest knowledge. And it might not, he admits here in this paragraph, you might look like a bumbling idiot in practical affairs with with the knowledge of the universal, right? Because in the world of affairs, it's all about actions, and actions are all about particulars. And so it might look like the philosopher, for instance, is not the highest form of knowledge, because they look like bumbling idiots in warfare and all the rest of it. But he wants to show that that would be to misconceive this type of knowledge. He has Aristophanes in mind, and a tradition of making fun of intellectuals in Athens. So yeah, okay, awesome. Thank you very, very much. If I don't have too many get sidetracked too much in preparation for next week, we'll get a lot more text done. But I would, okay, I guess this is what I'm thinking. Aristotle in this first book refers us to a passage in the Physics and a passage in the Nicomachean Ethics, right, where he elaborates these distinctions a little bit more. Since we want to be well-grounded in getting into the hard books of the metaphysics, Zeta onwards, I recommend that we read those passages. It's only a couple of pages, and it does fill out a little bit what he's talking about in terms of knowledge, and what theoretical knowledge is and how it's distinct from practical knowledge, which is very important because it relates exactly to what Nick brought up earlier about the distinction between practical and theoretical knowledge, and we have to keep that always in mind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest that we talk about, we finished our discussion of knowledge, and then, and before we begin talking about the four causes, I want to talk about the couple of pages in the Nicomachean Ethics, which that have to do with different kinds of knowledge. And then before we talk about the way in which causes are understood in the pre-Socratics, we're going to take a couple pages out of Aristotle's Physics, and where he just sets forth in greater detail and more with more clarity what the four causes are and why he distinguishes four. So I'm going to scan that, and then if you don't already have these books, don't worry about it. I'm going to scan the relevant pages. It's only about 5 or 6 pages, and we will discuss those before we look at his historical historical recounting of the way in which causes were thought by his predecessors. So I hope nobody minds adding more reading, but we're here for Aristotle. All right, anybody who wants to leave now is completely, won't insult anybody. Thank you very much for your patience and your attention and your hard work, and we'll see you next week. And I'm going to, as usual, going to go grab a beer, and I'll be back in about 5 minutes for any post-seminar chat. All right.
Okay, thank you. See you all next week.
Bye, Charlie.
Later.